We are live. We are live. Welcome to College Football's Peek Around the Corner with your host, Greg Pflugar. We cover everything in college football because we love everything in college football. And if you do as well, please subscribe to our channel. Smash the like button if you like our content. Share the video with your family and friends if you want to support this college football rebel outpost. If you want to support the home, the true home for the college football sickos, just hit that $ where you make a comment and I'll get to you super chat as quick as I possibly can. Welcome everybody into the studio. The very studio that sits on the very corner of Keith Jackson Parkway and Kurt Gowdy Avenue. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid to become a legend. With your comments and with your phone calls. Greg, why are you being so tough on the ACC today? You are never tough on Tony Petitti. You never say a bad word about Greg Sankey. You never rip on Brett Yormark. That's not true, by the way. In fact, I'm going to start ripping on Brett Yormark once again today. Today, once again, he got out there in public and he says he supports the 5+11. He's all in on the 5+11 college football playoff format. And I keep being told by foes and friends alike that Brett Yormark is playing fifth dimensional chess. He's not really saying in private what he says in public. He's really... Big 12, man, you got to wake up. Brett Yormark, you got to wake up. 5+11 with the SEC staying at 8 conference games. You're going to get smoked. You're going to get buried. Come on, Yormark. But I'm not ripping on Brett Yormark today. I am going to rip on the ACC. You know, I talk about Silent Tony quite a bit. He's got to be out. He's got to be out there more. It's part of the commissioner's job. It's part of the commissioner's job sometimes to stand on the soapbox and argue your point for your conference, for the institutions in your conference. Silent Tony has been silent too often. Well, Phillips, where are you? Where are you, Jim Phillips? We know you took the bath. We know you stayed silent. You did not fight for the Florida State Seminoles. A couple of years ago when the playoff committee, when Greg Sankey went out there, beating every rug to make sure that the SEC had as much argument, as much as inertia in the playoff committee to push Alabama over the line to get Alabama into the playoffs, and Florida State got screwed, and Phillips stayed silent. Well, I don't think it's gotten any better. There's just too much. I get it. Greg, you're being too difficult. Greg, this show's not for everybody. I rip on, I praise, I give flowers when I think bouquet of flowers should be handed out. But I'm also not scared to rip on the powerful, the elite of this sport. I'm not going to just sit here. You only live once. You only live once. I took my shots at Michigan. I've taken my shots at everybody when I think it's warranted. And I'm sorry, the ACC is a failed state at this point. It is a bunch of great institutions, but, you know, everything from clandestine phone calls with Smash Capital, where your commissioner was not involved, from Notre Dame drinking your milkshake, from Notre Dame making this deal with Clemson. And it wasn't just me who was wrong. I took the L. I gladly took the L. I gladly took the L on the ACC settlement with Florida State and with Clemson. Gladly. Florida State and Clemson, I said it from the moment that it happened. I declared it a massive victory for Florida State Clemson. ACC did not hold up well. And now we got this report from CBS Sports, where Florida State has got these rev share deals that are not normal. They're to the extreme. Now in defense of Florida State, in the article, it does say that Florida State is not the worst offender. They might not be the worst school. So I'm going to take my shots at Florida State, but there's one part of the article in which it states that the ACC didn't even have a template rev share contract to share with the other institutions in the league. The Big Ten did. We've talked about it. The SEC did. We've talked about it. And in fact, there have been national reporters that have looked at these templates, these lawyers who are advocating for the agents. I get a lot of the argument that Florida State is making. Not all of them, but I get a lot of them. I understand. But you got so months ago when the lawyers and everybody looked at the Big Ten template, they shot holes at it. How dare the Big Ten do this? Well, you got the ACC who don't even have a template. Their institutions are on their own. The ACC is completely rudderless. It really is. It truly, really is. I mean, I completely understand. Every week that goes by, it is a failed state. It's like Syria. It's like Libya. It's not a country anymore. It's not a state. It's a failed state. I completely understand why North Carolina is taking their time. Why North Carolina is taking their time, having clandestine phone calls with the top brands in the ACC and some with the Big 12. Why they're spending all this money on Blue Matters, having one of the top 4 most powerful law firms consult them on conference affiliation matters, because the ACC is an absolute rudderless state. When you start in this, when you start treating schools as unequal as the ACC is, it begins to wither. It begins to splinter. It begins to die. For all the chatter behind the curtain, I am absolutely convinced. That nothing is imminent at this time, but no way does this sucker last until 2030. No way does the ACC, the way it is constructed today, no way does it last until 2030. Not a chance. Not a chance in hell. It's going to be either poached or it's going to reimagine itself. But either way, the way the ACC is now, it's not going to last. I mean, you don't even... This Wisconsin-Miami thing, again, I know, I get it. Everybody's playing fifth dimensional chess. When people are quiet, that means they're smart. I don't know about that. You've got the Big Ten Conference laying wood onto Miami, saying it's and nothing out of nothing out of Phillips' office, nothing. Nothing out of Phillips. He hasn't even talking about the playoffs lately. It is everything about the ACC is crumbling. Now I know, look, there are great, incredible institutions in the ACC. Unbelievable institutions in the ACC. I'm talking about the conference. It is a failed state. It really, truly is. It is hanging on by a thread. It did not do the work. It did not provide guardrails for the institutions to follow when giving out rev share contracts. Why did the Southeastern Conference do that? Why did the Big Ten Conference do that? Why? Why couldn't the ACC do that? Because the ACC schools are just like, we're not going to follow it even if you gave it to us. We've sued you. You sued us back. There's no respect. There's nothing going on there. ACC is a failed state. And we are going to see the repercussions of that in the months ahead. It ain't going to take to 2030. It's not going to take to 2030. Now, I'm not laying all the blame on the ACC. I got a question for Florida State. What are you doing? Why do you have to be the most extreme? And now, a lot of people are blaming CBS Sports for this article. Again, you got sources at CBS that are saying you got a Big Ten, you got people questioning, why is Florida State going to this extreme on their contracts? Now, even in the Big Ten and the SEC, even with these templates, not all these contracts are going to look the same. They're not going to look the same between institutions, not 100%. And they're not going to look the same in regards to the student athlete. But they're going to be, in the SEC and the Big Ten, there are guardrails. In the ACC, there's nothing. I completely understand Florida State's been burned, just like every other football program out there. They've been burned by players committing and then going in the portal. But that option to decline, that option part of the Florida State rev share contract with their student athletes, woo! Holy smokes! I happen to believe that it's all going to right itself, because if that is true, if the reporting is accurate from CBS and Florida State has a part of that contract, the option where they control the option. In other words, if a player signs for 2 years, Florida State can extend the contract. With no renegotiation. And they can extend the contract. The option to extend, that's the name of it. Option to extend. And it can be at the same monetary value as the player just played. In other words, Florida State is setting up, if the player signs the contract, Florida State is setting up total control over that football player. From the moment he signs it, that 2-year deal really is not just a 2-year deal. Highly unusual. I happen to think that Florida State, I put it on the X account, that they're going to pull back on that. Because I get it. Florida State is doing great in recruiting. I've been told by Seminole fans, they've got 12 people committed in the last, I don't know how many days, last month, whatever. I'm sure they're doing a great job. Mike Norvell's back to high school recruiting. Great job. But you're going to get negative recruited on this, right? If you are a program in the southeastern part of this country and you're trying to recruit high school players, and you go to a high school player and you're talking about a rev share contract, and you're telling that player, you're looking at the contract, the same schools that are recruiting that same high school player, be it Florida Gators, be it Alabama, be it Missouri Tigers, be it Oklahoma, be it Texas A&M, be it LSU, those schools are going to be able to go to that player and say, you signed a 2-year contract. after that 2-year contract, we can't automatically extend your contract. We're going to have to renegotiate with you. That's going to be a lot more popular to that high school player than what Florida State is doing. So I don't think Florida State's going to be doing this for very long. In other words, there is going to be a market out there when it comes to these contracts. These players with their agents, with their lawyers, with their dads, with their moms, they're going to be looking at these contracts. Hopefully they get more educated. Hopefully they all have decent representation. And they look at these contracts. They contrast and compare these contracts. And they figure out what is the best one for them. But an option to extend that only goes to the school, my God, that is ruthless. That is highly unusual. And we're going to go through that report. Today, we're also going to go the Baylor Bears. The Baylor Bears are today's PATC Spotlight team. The Baylor Bears, to me, are a fascinating team. I've got them projected to go to the Big 12 championship game. Yes, not Kansas State, not Iowa State, not Utah, not BYU. I've got the Baylor Bears. Am I crazy? Or am I crazy like a fox? Am I still Greg the Cooler? Or has Greg the Gold finally arrived? The Baylor Bears offense, full of juniors and seniors, they're absolutely stacked. They're ready to go. The defense have brought in a lot of transfer players. They're going to need to click. Dave Aranda is coming back. You know, of course, he's the head coach, but this is his second year in a row. He's going to be the defensive coordinator. He's going to be calling the shots. Again, last year, the Baylor Bears were in the bottom half of the Big 12 in defense. They got to improve. They've got to improve. If they improve just a little bit, the Baylor Bears are going to be right there because that offense against the Auburn Tigers, week 1, that offense is ready to go. It's ready to go. It's ready to score. So the Baylor Bears are a spotlight team for today, and we've got a lot more to get through. We got a big show. Ricky Tungates, thank you so much for your super chat. Holy smokes. Thank you so much for your super chat. I appreciate all your support, Mr. Hoosier. Indiana, I think that could be the possible next spotlight team. There was an article out about Fernando Mendoza today. He had an interview. I don't think people understand what an incredible season Fernando Mendoza had last year. It was shockingly great for the California Bears. What he was able to do, the high completion percentage, the 16 touchdowns, something like 6 interceptions. I don't quite remember. But he was shockingly great because the California Bears offensive line was an absolute sieve. Fernando Mendoza was getting crushed. He had to get rid of the ball in a nanosecond. But yet he put on a performance. They had a bunch of crushing losses. They had a couple of sweet come-from-behind victories. Fernando Mendoza, you know what? Fernando Mendoza is better than Curtis Rourke. And you guys know how much I like Curtis Rourke. I talked about him when he was the Ohio Bobcats MAC Player of the Year a couple years ago. And then he had that bad knee injury. I've been a Rourke fan for 4 years. And then he finally, in his last year, transferred to Indiana. And look what they did. But Fernando Mendoza is a better quarterback. So Indiana's got a better quarterback than they had last year. They got Sirac back, the great wide receiver. They've got all Big Ten players on the defensive line, linebacker, and in the secondary. Don't be fooled. Indiana is going to be knocking on the door again for the playoffs in 2025. Thank you, Ricky Tungate. I appreciate the super chat so very much. Mowing After Dark. Jim Phillips is to leadership as mowing is to sobriety. Wait until the bleat gets weird. Ooh, I think I know. I think I know what mowing is referring to. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, guys. I think the if somebody speculates to you or on this show, gives me a phone call and speculates a wild scenario happening among the ACC schools when it comes to the next wave of disruption, if they come with me with a wild speculation, a scenario that would never happen, I'm not going to completely shut the door on it. That is where we're at. The ACC clandestine phone calls, things could get very weird. It is a rudderless organization. Thank you, Mowing After Dark. Thank you so much for your generosity and for your friendship and all the help you give me on this show. Thank you, sir. Mr. Buckeye, of course. Now, Mowing, Mowing was calling me Greg the Curse last night on his show. They were laughing at me because my wins against the spread have been in the high 30 percentile, give it low 40 percentile. So they were cracking jokes at my expense last night as I sat and watched the live show College Football Mafia. But what he doesn't know, what Mowing doesn't know, which you all know, is that 2025 is not 2024. It's not 2023. It's not 2022. 2025 is not the year of Greg the Cooler. It's the year of Greg the GOAT. So Mowing, College Football Mafia. There's not many weeks left. What, 9 weeks left? Where you can call me Greg the Cooler, Greg the Cold, Greg the Icebox. There's only so many weeks left because when week 0 appears, when Dublin, Ireland, when it's Armageddon, when it's the Cyclones and the Wildcats, Greg the Gold will appear before your eyes. Let's go. Okay. Stick with us here at Peek Around the Corner. Stick with us during week 0, week 1, week 2, while I pile up the wins against the spread and I beat you geniuses every single week as you guys make your picks. Okay, let's get to it. We got a big show tonight. Has been, thank you so much for the super chat. Off topic. Would it be smart for the Big Ten to tap into the $450 million cash on hand to subsidize private charter travel for non-revenue team traveling more than, say, 500 to 700 miles, spend the money on the athletes and the PR? I don't think so, has been. I don't know what they're going to use that money for. I don't know what they're going to use that money for, but I don't think it's going to be that. I think what they're going to use that money for is something that will make them more money and the schools more money. So the schools will take the individual schools' responsibility to pay for that travel. I don't think it's going to be paid by the conference. Now, there has been travel stipends out there, but in large part, I don't think they're going to go into the conference coffers to do that. But on the other hand, I do not know what they're going to use that money for. That money continues to grow, by the way, because many, many, many different examples. One, the Big Ten Network. Each school, each fully invested school, which there are 16 of them, Oregon and Washington are not yet. They will be in a few years. But each of those schools, those 16 schools, own a slice of the Big Ten Network. But there are 17 slices, not 16. The Big Ten Conference gets its own revenue slice from the Big Ten Network. So while the Buckeyes are picking up $11 million, and Michigan is picking up $11 million, and Purdue is picking up $11 million, and Nebraska is picking up $11 million, the Big Ten Conference is cashing in $11 million every year. And also something like the news that broke today, the PayPal, which we're going to talk about. We talked about in an episode earlier today. You know, the Big 12's getting a little bit of slice of that. It's approximately $1 million per school per year in the Big 12 off the PayPal Venmo deal. The Big 12 is going to get a little bit of that, and the Big 10 deal, which there has been no reporting on the money part of that deal, the Big 10 is going to get a slice of that. So that $450 million continues to grow. I don't know what they're going to use it on. I don't think it's going to be that. I could be wrong. Just giving you my opinion. But I think it's going to be investing in something that makes them more money in something at some point. Maybe possibly helping a school pay for their exit fee, for example. But I do not know. But thank you, Has-Been, for the wonderful question. Thank you so very much for your generosity. I appreciate it so very much. I love Tony White. There's nobody who loves Tony White better than me. There's nobody that has more respect than Tony White than me. I am a true believer in Tony White. He's going to be a head coach pretty soon. He's got to be a head coach. But the Seminoles defense has a very good defensive coordinator. The guys on the football field are going to know what they're doing. They're going to run that 3-5, 5-3, whatever the hell they're going to run. The flex defense that they did at Nebraska. The 3-5. And it's going to confuse some people. It's going to confuse some people out there in ACC country. It confused the hell out of the Gophers. Now, Tony White was not able to beat the Gophers because Nebraska could not score. by Tony White befuddled a lot. Nebraska defense improved greatly under Tony White. He did a great job at Syracuse. I'm a big believer in Tony White. Okay, I don't know why we got off that topic. Jose's in the house. The Almighty Finn is here. CFB Plus, MG Sooner, Richard L, D5 Terps, the Cornhuskers, Scave, and yes, Penn State, Bob Swang. Thanks for coming on in. Randy Taylor's in the house. The Walking Geek is here. CFB Plus, Tim Bales, Charlie Atwood, Clemson alumnus. We did a Clemson PATC Spotlight show yesterday. Today we're doing the Baylor Bears. Chad Bracey's in the house. Old Army 02 is here. Daniel Gorby, Jonathan Anderson, Rock Chalk, Vox Quindaro is back in the house. John Bennett, Rock Chalk, is in the house. The Almighty Finn, Jonathan Anderson, full share for all of the SCC. Yeah, that is true. That is very true. Who else is here? War Room, USC, baby. USC's feeling pretty good about themselves. A lot of steam about your wide receiver, Makai Lemon. He was fantastic last year. I love Deuce Robinson, but he's gone. He transferred. But Lemon was a lot better than Zachariah Branch, tell you that. Kalani's in the house. AMAC is here. Don Scruggs, the Georgia Bulldogs, Florida man, go Seminoles. Karan Shakar is in the house. Happy Thursday. Tom DeBay is here. Kind of like the 1970s Boston Red Sox. I love those teams. Let me see how many players I can name. My memory's gone. Fred Lynn, Carlton Fisk, Carl Yastrzemski. My mind is completely gone. Louis Tiant. That's about it. My mind is gone. Daniel Gygax is in the house. If Notre Dame had a splinter, Jim Phillips would rail against the lumber industry. Wow. I'm trying to be professional. Good evening, my PATC family. Thanks for coming on in. Breeze in Georgia. OptiCat is in the house. Morris Simmons. Hot recruiting in Seminole Country. Bo Weevil, Go Tigers, is in the house. Rock and Rant. Florida State guys, between this and Castellanos talking too much, it's been a rough week. The elbows are being thrown. Nick Kelso's in the house. Devil Frog is here. A lot of stories about Josh Hoover. A lot of big money came after him, but he declined. He stayed at TCU. Lee's in the house. Lee's taking a shot at Baylor. Not good, Lee. Y'all, you know what the good news is? The good news is in 9 weeks, you are all going to learn that it's the year of Greg the Gold. Watch that Baylor-Auburn game. Watch it. I think Auburn is favored by 2.5. I could be wrong. Something like that. The Baylor Bears are going to cover and win. The Baylor Bears are going to cover and win. I just gave you a sneak peek at the brilliance of Greg the Gold headed into 2025. Cougar Tracks is in the house. Jason Roberts is here. Eric Johnson is here. James Davis is here. Can't be Penn State because Greg picked them. Wrong again, Mr. Davis. Wrong again, Goal Line Cooler. What is that, Rock and Rant? What is that? Mr. Mountaineer, Daniel Gygax is living in the past. He's living in the past. What's happened with Daniel Gygax is he sits next to Moen. He confers with Rock and Rant. He's picking up their negativity. Daniel Gygax is picking up their negativity. He doesn't understand because he's been blinded. He's been blinded. Al Bundy is in the house. John Dry is here. The alternative something another. Now I screwed up the board. The alternative hypothesis is here. Jeff Morgan is here. The Florida man. Hypothesis. Jen Fari is here. Go Black 45. Sorry, Go Black 45, but LSU is making the playoffs. They're making the playoffs as a number 6 seed. It's in the books. Well, it's not official yet. I still got to make a change or two. Again, I got to get Louisville in these playoffs. The way too early predictions, LSU number 6. They're going to lose the opener. They're going to lose the opener to Clemson, but then they're going to get on a roll. Mayor McCheese is in the house. Steel Austin is here. What's up, Gold Nose? Mike W. is here. Christopher Hooters in the house. Expansion Crush. I just talked about Fernando Mendoza. He's better than Curtis Rourke. That is not a shot at Mr. Rourke. Expansion Crush. Daniel Montcastle, you know how much I like Curtis Rourke. You know how much I liked him when he wore the green of the Ohio Bobcats. But Fernando Mendoza is better. Higher ceiling. Look out, Big Ten. Look out, Big Ten. Okay, here we go. We got a big show today. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Let me make sure here. I got everybody. Jacober Cat, thank you so much for the super chat. I very much appreciate it. The dual mentality of the ACC is like a masochist who longs for punishment. It titillates their confirmation bias, knowing the world treats them equal to how they feel about themselves.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
Thank you so much, Jacober Cat. I love your very unique and creative comments on the Super Chats. Thank you so much for your generosity. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to let everybody interpret that at their own individual level. And I'm going to leave that alone. Jacober Cat, thank you so very much for your generosity. First, we got a lot to get to here. Let's just go over this PayPal. I did it I went in not too much in depth, but I did an episode earlier today, episode 444. If you missed it, go check it out. Ross Dellinger reports that the Big 12 and the Big 10 are announcing independently today a partnership with PayPal to serve as each league's official system for revenue sharing payments to athletes. The Big 12 deal is significant, valued at nearly $100 million over 5 years, approximately $1 million per school annually, sources say. Then Ben Portnoy of the Sports Business Journal, Venmo, which is owned by PayPal, which also will be a presenting partner of the Big Ten Rivalry Series, an official partner of the Big 12. The rivalry series will include matchups across football, men's basketball, women's basketball. A slew of Big Ten football trophy games, for example, are expected to be included. So you can see now We know that the Big Ten Incorporated. Let me rephrase. No, not let me. Let me repeat that. Big Ten Incorporated. Big Ten Incorporated trademarked Big Ten Rivalry Series. They trademarked that. Big Ten Corporate. So, just want to leave that there. You know, the entity that might be taking on a private equity deal in the future. The Big Ten Rivalry Series. So you can see a future. Florida Rosedale. The battle for the pig presented by Venmo. The Iowa Hawkeyes versus the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Just one of many examples. Now, PayPal is probably going to want to do the game. Venmo is going to want to do the game. Venmo, the game. Venmo presents the game. The Wolverines versus the Buckeyes. And again, we do not know the monetary value of the Big Ten, Venmo, and PayPal deal. But it's probably pretty big. And this deal is worth $3 million. No. It's 3 years. 3 years. 3 years. The Big 12 deal goes on for 5 years. Okay, so that's all. You know, you guys give me a comment, give me a call later on the show, talk about that. We already talked about that earlier today. Now we're going to go into the Baylor Bears, Spotlight, PATC Spotlight. Sawyer Robertson came on like a freight train last year. Over 3,000 yards passing, 28 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 62.2 completion percentage, a 153.1 quarterback rating. Sawyer Robertson gonna lead the Baylor Bears. Holy smokes. Now, last year was his first year as a starting quarterback. First year against the live bullets. He's gonna be ready this year. He's gonna crank it up even to another level. And if he does, and if the Baylor Bears, all those transfer players, which we're going to talk about in a moment on the defense end, it's all about their defense. Their offense is going to be elite. The Baylor Bears offense is going to be elite. Sawyer Robertson has a lot of help. He's got a lot of help. Bryson Washington, over 1,000 yards last year. Almost 6 yards per average rush. 12 rushing TDs. 22 catches out of the backfield. They've got a stud quarterback. They've got a stud running back. But that's not the only running back they have, by the way. We'll get to their RB2. In a second, but Bryson Washington is going to be a superstar this year. The Baylor Bears are going to be lethal on the ground, lethal in the air. Dawson Pendergrass, RB2, 671 yards rushing, 5.5 yards a carry, 6 rushing TDs, short yardage running back. Will get you the first down. The Baylor Bears backfield is potent. Now, the wide receiver room is going to need some people to step up, but Josh Cameron is going to be back. By the way, he's like, I don't know, second or third team All-American when it comes to a punt returner, a sensational punt returner. The Baylor Bears special teams is spectacular. We did, a couple weeks ago, we did the first team All-ACC. And they got punter Palmer Williams was all All Big 12 last year. He's coming back. He almost averaged 50 yards a punt. They also picked up one of the best place kickers in the last year's high school class. I don't remember the guy's name. The Baylor's Bears special teams at a very high elite for this season. Now on defense, they're going to need some help. They went into the portal. They got an Oregon transfer. They got a guy from Florida International at linebacker. They're going to need those guys to step up. But they do have Keaton Thomas, the linebacker, over 100 tackles last year, 7 tackle for losses, 2.5 sacks. In fact, they had 2 linebackers with over 100 tackles last year. Keaton Thomas is going to be the leader of the defense. But the Baylor Bears, this is your spotlight on the Baylor Bears for 2025. We've already said it. They start the season against Auburn. I think they're 2.5-point dogs. Or they're favored by 2.5. I don't remember. No, they're at home. I think they're favored by 2.5. Take the Bears. Take the Baylor Bears in that game. And look, they play at SMU, Stanford, that home game September 20th against Arizona State. That's the big one, guys. They don't play BYU. They play Arizona State. They play Kansas State. Both games at home. Both games at home. Arizona State and Kansas State at home. I think it all lines up for the Baylor Bears to contend, to get into the Big 12 championship game. Maybe nobody else has them in the country to get there. I do. I got the Baylor Bears. The schedule lines up. That offense is full of seniors and juniors. That has to be the oldest offense in the country. They've got a lot of guys. They've got a lot of snaps. And they were very impressive last year, but they're going to take it to another level. They also have an offensive lineman named Sidney Fugar. It doesn't have the L at the beginning, and it doesn't have the U smashed between the A and the R at the end of the name. But anybody who's got an offensive lineman named Fugar, well, that team is going places. The Baylor Bears going to the Big 12 championship. This is the most Baylor talk I've ever heard, and I've lived in Texas for 50 years. Well, that's what we do here. We take each live show for the last 10 weeks of the offseason. Each live show, we do a spotlight on one team. Tomorrow is going to be a different team. And for you to find out what that team is, you're going to have to check out our live show tomorrow. Greg, I did put $10 on West Virginia to win the college football playoffs. Well, that $10, Daniel Gygax. I believe in Rich Rod. I do. I think it was a good hire. But this year, West Virginia, too much change. But I am looking forward to what happens in the quarterback room. Is Nico Marchio going to be your guy? Is it going to be that new guy, Henderson? What's going to happen in the West Virginia Mountaineer quarterback room? Because that is the unit that Rich Rod has been bragging about the most. So if we see production out of the quarterback room, that means Rich Rod at least has his thumb on the pulse of the Mountaineer football program. There's going to be a lot of excitement in Morgantown. A lot of excitement in Morgantown. Pflugar could be a wide receiver. Emphasis on the wide. Wow. They're taking shots at me today. Okay, let's go in CBS article. That's not normal. Chris Hummer's being getting pummeled by the Seminole fan base. Well, I've been pummeled by the Seminole fan base in the past. I've been pummeled by every fan base in the past. It comes with the territory. Chris Hummer, that's not normal. Florida State's rev share contracts are raising eyebrows. Agents and industry experts say. Since this is a new and uncharted territory, they're trying to put in as many things as they can think of and protect that university and see what they get, push back on and what they don't. Mitt Winter, an attorney who works heavily in the NIL space, told CBS Sports. Put another way, by an NIL agent, they're throwing everything they can in the kitchen sink. We're talking about the Florida State rev share contract with their student athletes. That sink, it's appearing quite often in Tallahassee. According to multiple agent sources who have at least one player on the Florida State roster, the Seminoles have included what those agents describe as aggressive language in their rev share contract, which cover a broad range of issues and are issued directly by the school. One clause, which CBS Sports has seen a copy of. Now, we don't go through the whole article. Okay? I'm warning everybody, I do not go through the whole article. One clause, which CBS Sports has seen a copy of, allows the team to extend a player at the end of their contract unilaterally without having to negotiate with the player. Another section of the team on team rules, common in most NIL or rev share deals, includes a maximum $2,500 fine on the first offense if a player loses team equipment such as a pair of cleats. The max fine for using a controlled substance for the first time is $1,000. What I'm most interested in is it allows the team to extend a player at the end of their contract unilaterally without having to negotiate with the player. That is, I don't know what student athlete would ever sign a contract like that. If they have an option, if they have a choice, and Florida State their recruiting class is elite, so they're going after guys who have choices. That's why I think Florida State's got to scale this back. Because they're going to be negative recruit. I mean, Miami, all those teams around in that area, Alabama, Georgia, Georgia Tech, Missouri, Tennessee, they're all going to be going at these players, and they're going to be, look at what Florida State makes you do. You sign a 2-year contract, and they can extend the player at the end of the contract unilaterally without having to negotiate with you. This is not, that part of this ain't gonna hold up. Some of the concepts are pretty standard. An agent who represents at least one Florida State player said they were granted anonymity to allow them to speak freely. But Florida State is going about this far more aggressively than any school I've seen. I'm disappointed by the adversarial nature of these contracts. It's not just agents who take exception with the way Florida State is attempting to write its rev share contracts. CBS Sports contacted at least one general manager from every Power 4 conference to understand if some of the Florida State provisions are considered normal. Said one Big Ten general manager, of the 3 stipulations above, that's not normal. Said a GM from the Big 12, I do understand they have all the leverage, But if still, other agents contacted by CBS Sports said while Florida State is contentious with its reworked rev share agreements, the pushy and controlled language isn't exactly uncommon. I don't think Florida State is the worst at all in this business, said an agent with a player on Florida State's roster. There are schools I trust less. Florida State, who reached for comment, offered this statement via spokesperson in response to questions about some of the provisions CBS Sports highlights in this piece. Florida State, this is their response. As we enter into a new age of collegiate athletics, Florida State has put together an agreement that provides deliverables and expectations for all parties. Each individual situation will be unique, and the hypotheticals are impossible to predict. However, we are committed to the continuing to provide an elite experience for our student athletes in all aspects of their collegiate career. Florida State is looking forward to mutually beneficial partnerships with our student athletes in this new era. This is the PATC money shot. This is the PATC money shot. In conversations with 3 agents who represent at least one Florida State player who has been sent their full rev share contract in recent weeks, the Seminoles seem to have settled on a standard contract for its roster. Big Ten and the SEC schools generally work off a standardized contract the conference provides to its schools. The ACC does not have a contract baseline for its programs. The lack of universal standard in the ACC has led to some unique language from the Seminoles. So again, Florida State is like, they don't know what the Clemson contracts look like. They don't know what the Miami contracts look like. They don't know what the Syracuse Orange contracts look like. They're all out there on their own. They don't want to be got by a player, by another institutions. They want to tighten this up as much as possible. They don't have a standardized contract template to work off of, where the ACC legal department got their act together and they said this should work in the guidelines of what is coming down the chute when it comes to the settlement, when it comes to the rev share. This is what we're allowed to do. This is what we shouldn't do. But no, the ACC does not have that direction. They don't have that direction. And again, I asked the question, what the hell is going on with Jim Phillips? Is it because these ACC schools told Jim Phillips, don't even bother? Don't even bother. Because, why? Because ACC, the way it is now, the way it's constituted, ain't going to be around very much longer? Or is it a case of, holy smokes, Jim Phillips, why would we take a standardized contract from you? You just got done suing us. I don't know. But right now, the ACC is acting like a failed state. A failed state that can't manage itself. The option to extend. The option to extend. Florida State shall have until the end of the student athletes' NCAA eligibility, dependent successive options to extend the term under the same terms and conditions as the existing term. unless the parties mutually agree in writing to a change in terms and conditions for additional periods of 1 year, providing written notice of such an extension to a student athlete no later than 20 days prior to the expiration of the current term of the agreement. Under such an extension option, the total compensation payable to student athlete for 1 year extension period should be pro rata annualization portion of the compensation set for the initial term. That language, which allows Florida State to extend a student athlete's deal pretty much at will by the end of the contract, is considered uncommon when talking with agent and general manager sources across the country. And finally, in the article, that locks a kid in for the rest of his eligibility with no ability to negotiate. Now, he does have I think that's an overstatement. He does have, but they have to be proactive. Most of the time, you're at the end of your contract, you renegotiate. I've been a running back. I'm a sophomore. I'm at the end of my 2-year rev deal. I just ran over 1,000 yards. Let's renegotiate. But Florida State, they can extend the option. They can extend the deal unilaterally. Many schools provide players a window to negotiate after every regular season. Other programs like the ASCC have begun writing a first right of refusal clause, which allows them to match a higher offer if they receive one from another school. But sources CBS spoke to consider Florida State extensive clause unusually one-sided. I've never seen that before, Winter said. I would say that's not a usual provision. So again, it's even written in the article. There are agents who are saying there's other schools that are even more ruthless, less trustworthy than Florida State. So the feeling I get out of this article is Florida State may not be the worst offender of these brutal contracts, but they're up there. They're definitely up there. When you're able to extend a current deal unilaterally, wow. These type of contracts are the greatest argument for a collective bargaining agreement. It's why really the labor needs a collective bargaining agreement, because these deals are ruthless to the labor, to the player. These are going to be binding contracts up into a certain point. Because they're student athletes, I think the students are going to be able to go and transfer and go to another school, but there's going to be buyout provisions. But man, to be able to extend a player without renegotiating, and you can keep it at the same terms, wow, that is some hardball stuff that Florida State. Now again, I think Florida State's going to I think everyone's going to have to make adjustments. Not just Florida State. Not just schools in the ACC. Schools in the Big Ten. Schools in the SEC. They're going to have to make continual adjustments because of the marketplace. They're going to be negotiating with the player who's in the portal. Or they're going to be negotiating with the player that is coming out of high school. And the player is going to say, look, you're offering this, but guess what? I'm getting this from another school. I'm getting more flexibility from this school. I want flexibility in my contracts. So the schools that are more rigid, who can unilaterally extend your deal, that's probably going to become more unpopular as the message goes off to all the agents and top-rated high school and transfer portal players. But what labor wants, what the players want, might change over time. And we're not just talking about, we're also talking about compensation. There might be, I think, this is just my speculation. I think rev share contract for 6'7" left tackles, 315 pounds. If you are not a 5-star, those rev share numbers, how big are they going to be? Because those first 2 years, big old left tackle coming out of high school, it takes a while. Not all of them. Some of them perform right off the bat. But if you are a left tackle who has produced for 2 years and you're in the portal because you signed a 2-year rev share contract, you're in the portal, the compensation for those transfer portal players, left tackle, those key positions, man, they're going to be big. It's going to be big, high-priced contracts for that type of talent. But I think there's going to be adjustments continually. I think Florida State's going to adjust. I think everybody is going to adjust. But the question I have when I read that article is, what was the ACC doing? What were they doing? Again, it's nothing. That's the answer I always get back. It's nothing. We covered the story of the Big Ten and the SEC writing up these templates, making sure there's some commonality among the Big Ten contracts and the SEC contracts. This is a subject in which those two conferences talked about with each other during the advisory meetings. That was reported. What was the ACC doing? Did a large part of the ACC schools say, don't bother? Was it a decision made by the schools to say, we don't want no standardized, we're going on our own? Is the ACC so splintered? Remember, North Carolina, who we have reported is the number one target for the SEC and the Big Ten, they agreed with Florida State and Clemson not to expand the conference. North Carolina went against the wishes of Notre Dame. Phillips wanted to expand the conference. He wanted that extra money from SMU that ESPN was going to pay for so they could spread it out. I don't know how much, I really do not know how much power Jim Phillips has anymore. That settlement, to me, that was ESPN pushing Phillips to that settlement to give Florida State and Clemson that massive victory. I think Phillips is completely powerless against Notre Dame. Whatever Notre Dame wants, Notre Dame gets. Notre Dame says their games against Clemson will count for one of the 5 games scheduling with the ACC. Jim Phillips says no. Who's going to win that battle? I don't know. I think Jim Phillips is completely, I think it's a combination of his leadership and the cards that he has. I think he's looking at a 2-7 offsuit in Texas Hold'em. I think his down cards are as brutal as they possibly can be. and nobody is going for his bluffs. I think all that is leading to this. I think the ACC is completely rudderless. And I think when there is a vacuum of leadership, and I'm not just blaming Phillips, I'm blaming Phillips, but it ain't all his fault, of course. He got the ACC handed to him like it was. But when you have a vacuum like this, it gets filled. It gets filled. And I got a feeling that clandestine phone call is a symptom, a clue, an indicator, a leading indicator of what is really going on in ACC. It's a failed state, not failed institutions. North Carolina State, great institution. Wake Forest, Duke, Miami, all great institutions. But the conference itself has lost its way completely. And it hasn't even been poached yet, other than Maryland. Notre Dame's calling the shots. A partial member is calling the shots. ACC is a failed state. I'm going to take your phone calls. You can talk about anything you want to talk about in college football. You can let me know how wrong I got it. You can tell me that the Baylor Bears are going to get crushed by the Auburn Tigers. You can tell me that the Baylor Bears are not going to get to the Big 12 championship game. You're going to be wrong, but you've got the freedom to say it in your phone calls or in the comments. You can talk about the Florida State contracts. You can tell me that they're not unusual. They're not uncommon. Florida State is just looking out for themselves. You can tell me that the ACC is not a failed state. They're playing fifth-dimensional chess, Greg. Greg. You can't even play checkers, Greg. You can't even play checkers. How are you going to be able to even figure out the fifth-dimensional chess that the ACC is going on right now? They are playing a game that you don't understand, Greg. Clandestine phone call, cloak and dagger. Let's get to phone calls. 763-260-1333, 763-260-1333. The phone lines are open. Again, please subscribe to our channel if you haven't done it yet. What are you waiting for? And open up those notifications. Turn them on. We can come on live at any time. Anytime with a live show. You got to have those notifications turned on.
Call from
Jeff Fuller.
Jeff Fuller is on the line. BYU Cougars, Rider Lions, 5-star out of Folsom, California. Go ahead, Jeff. I appreciate you calling. The floor is yours.
How about that? Yeah, great 5-star Rider Lions. Hope it pans out. Have had a little bad history with top-rated QBs, but that's long-term history.
Yep.
But yeah. I mean, exciting kind of guy you can build around. Other recruits are excited. This is possibly a sea change moment, and would really be great to see as a BYU fan.
Yes, sir.
Great show. Love. I agree with. It's really interesting seeing the leadership styles, and I've sort of had this idea, and other people have mentioned it about the ACC is sort of the little Big Ten, and the Big 12 is the little SEC. They're both Big Ten and ACC are a little more. They're a little more prideful on their academics and their, maybe Director's Cup, overall athletic departments, and just institutionally seem a little more aligned. And the SEC and Big 12, their strength is more about, we've got great passionate fan bases. We fill up stadiums. We have more parity, stronger teams top to bottom. ACC and Big 10, you have a few royalty members, 3, 4, 5 at the top, and then, decent middle and weaker bottoms. Again, I don't want to be offensive, but the difference between the tops and the bottom of the conferences is very similar in the Big Ten, ACC, and in the SEC and Big 12, where there's more. And this seems to apply to leadership styles as well, and how vocal the commissioners are. Both Sankey and Yormark, very proactive, very out there, talk to the media, promote the brand, so that's interesting. And, I don't know if Phillips has taken his clues from Petiti, but yeah, they've both been MIA in general, and not, and I think I've called before and said that Petiti seems like a boardroom commissioner. He's not a promoter. He's not a public figure. He's just like, let's talk and let's figure out the best strategy, and we'll let the chips fall where they may. He didn't really see the need to go out and sell the idea of the 4-4-2-2-1-3, where Sankey did put it out there and got a lot of backlash. And I think the biggest fear, again, I hope I'm not rambling, but I think the biggest fear for a lot of college football fans is a super league that doesn't include their team. I think the concern with a lot of ACC and Big 12 folks and other G6 programs now is that if this plan was effectuated, it was almost like an okey doke of the SEC and the Big Ten creating a de facto super conference. If SEC goes to 9 games and you have a scheduling alliance with the Big Ten, that pretty much locks out any cross-conference, games between those two conferences and anyone else. I mean, obviously they'll still schedule the body bag games, and there may be a few, high-profile games with some of the biggest brands that occasionally pop up. But I think you lose your, the Cy-Hawk, Iowa State. I think you lose Kentucky, Louisville. I think you lose Florida State, Clemson, South Carolina, et cetera. There are a lot of these, rivalries that would just go away if that, everyone plays 9 conference games and the SEC and the Big Ten have a scheduling agreement. So my, what I think everyone should do, and tell me how this is wrong, but if the media partners agree, let's do a Big Ten and SEC scheduling agreement, but the Big Ten goes down to 8 conference games, and the ACC goes. The ACC is already at 8 conference games. It's really two conferences are at 9 and 2 are at 8, and 8 has been traditionally through history. 8 has been sort of what's common in the conferences, and only when conferences had 10. Did they go to 9 games? That's, the Big 12, when they lost members and went down to 10 total teams, that's when they went to 9 games. And the Big 10, sort of went there for a different reason, and I think it was media partners wanted it. But if the media partners could be appeased of, hey, the Big 10 is not going to play their 9th conference game, but it's they get the home games for the SEC Big Ten showdown, so to say. For the SEC, their media partner may boost a little bit their pay. I think if they went to 9 games, the promise was $5 million more a team per year, and maybe they promise $2 or $3 million more if they stay at 8 but get this Big Ten thing, and let's get the Big 12 to go back to 8 games. But I think it would be great if all 4 of the commissioners could agree, and the media partners, that everyone plays 8 conference games, but everyone has a requirement that they play 2 other power conference teams. Because what we need to see who are the best conferences and who deserves these at-large spots are more data points. And right now there's not enough, cross-conference games to really tease that out. It really hinges on a few games. In basketball, you better do a lot better job in that because there's a lot more games. But if there's, every team is playing 2 power league out of conference games, you have a lot more data and you can tell better which conferences, are doing the best and maybe more deserving of those at-large spots. So tell me where I'm wrong, Greg.
I don't think you're wrong, and I think you state a very good case. I don't think it's a matter of right or wrong. In fact, I think you explained very well how the Big Ten would not lose value in their TV deal if they went to 8 games. If they, they're replacing that 9th conference game with a crossover with the SEC and everything. But I just don't think it's plausible. And I'll right or wrong, I don't think the Big Ten looks at their arrangement that they have as just purely a scheduling arrangement. I think the Big Ten looks at their conference, their partnership, their fellow institutions as actual conference mates, and they want to play each other more often. I don't think they're going. I think there's a much better chance that the Big Ten someday goes to 10 conference games than rather goes to 8 conference games. The athletic directors are firmly saying, we want 9. We're staying at 9. Not only are we doing that, but when they went to no divisions, athletic director after athletic director went in front of the microphone and said, our presidents told us we have to play each other more often. So it wasn't just like a competition decision. It was binding the conference more together, playing each other more often. And they're doing that in other sports. They're making sure that they're playing as many schools as they can throughout like a 2-year period in softball and baseball and all these other sports. So I don't think they're going to go to 8. I think, Jeff.
So then they're not going to go to 8, but they're going to demand that the SEC go.
Well,
to 9.
they can't. They're not going to be able to force the SEC go to 9. They're not going to be able to. Yeah. They're going to say.
I don't know. A lot of the rhetoric is.
Well, sure it is. Sure, I think the SEC should go to 9. That's just an opinion. I think they should go to 9, just like you think Big Ten should go to 8. The Big Ten can't force the SEC to go to 9. So what we're going to do is we're going to stick at 12 playoff games, 12 team playoffs, because the Big Ten ain't going to go to 16, 5 plus 11, while the SEC stays at 8 conference games.
Yeah, I believe, and that's, I think you're right. I think that's where things are right now. Yeah. I believe that the way things are structured, that, if the Big Ten and the SEC are in agreement, they can push through whatever they want. But I think it's the other way, that if one of those conferences, gets all the other votes from the Big 12 and the ACC, that they would be able, that neither the SEC nor the Big Ten by itself has absolute veto power on those decisions. Is that true, what I'm hearing, or is that?
No, I have asked that question because the reporting has been very vague on all that.
You're right.
But when I asked that question, I was told basically the Big Ten has the veto, SEC has the veto. It's not like a bunch of votes can go against one of those two. They're going to have to agree, or we're going to stay the same. And I don't think they're going to agree. I don't think they're going to. I have heard, Jeff, they're not going to do that 5 plus 11 while the SEC, the math, the data. This is why the SEC is pushing for it, because they know they clean up. They absolutely clean up within 8 conference games. I've heard Nicole Auerbach today, Brandon Marcello 247, and then Nicole Auerbach piggyback off what Marcello said. So Brandon Marcello said, well, because we can't dictate how many conference games a certain conference plays. Let's dictate that everybody plays 10 Power 4 teams, 10 Power 4 opponents, and leave it at that. Okay?
Hey, yeah.
But
I think that'd be great.
Okay, now
I
you
think
think
the
that's
Big
great.
12 in that should move back to 8 games, and I guess if the Big 10 wants to stay at 9, they can do that. Again, I know the media partners, I don't know if they'd hedge at that, but that's interesting. I'll have to look that up.
But for me, it still doesn't work because not everybody's, because there's a difference between. I'll just keep it at Big 10 and SEC because that's where the angst is. There's still a difference between Big 10 playing 10 Power 4 teams and an SEC playing 10 Power 4 teams. When the Big 10 is playing 9 conference games and the SEC is playing 8. Because as you know, Jeff, more conference games are more automatic losses to that teams and that conference.
Oh, absolutely.
Jeff, that the Big 12, when the Big 12 horse is running around the track at a mile and a fourth, one and a quarter mile race, your horse has a 118-pound jockey on it. The ACC horse has a 112-pound jockey on it. That's the way it is. The Big 12 carries an extra weight because they're carrying that extra conference game, which gives the conference It gives them more. It gives them extra losses. Mathematically, it's not avoidable.
Yeah.
So,
and that's part of what we saw with BYU and Iowa State. If it were a 16-team playoff last year, their CFP ranking was 17 and 18.
Yeah.
Just on people say, Big 12 should sign on this 4-4-2-2-1 because look at last year, they would have only gotten 1 team in, and the ACC they got 3 in. So I see your point there, but the strength of the strength of schedule is one thing. I hope it's not put in as a separate metric, but I'm okay with resume metrics, strength of record, other things that look at resume, and I'm not hot on including the ratings, type systems like SPI and other things where it takes in recruiting rankings and a lot of like historical records and these predictive metrics that are used to set betting lines. Those should not be used to see who's in the playoff. But if with what it was heard about the Google guy, and if it's more resume based, that makes sense to me. And I know the Big Ten hedges at that with the extra conference games, as the Big 12 should. But hopefully we can all agree and we get to everyone doing the same thing. If everyone goes to 9 and, maybe the Big 12, I just don't see how the Big 12 or the ACC will be playing, the Big 10 or the SEC ever. And I don't think that's good for college football. But and I'll finish listening a little later. I got to meet with the family now, but I appreciate the show. Love you giving me the platform to talk, and always enjoyable, Greg.
Beautiful. Thanks for the call, sir. Beautiful, Jeff.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Great call by Jeff. Both giving our opinions.
Call from
Patron, thanks for calling, sir. I appreciate it. The floor is yours.
Awesome. Good evening, Greg. Thanks for taking the call.
You got it, buddy.
Hey, Greg. So I wanted to, what I was going to talk about or ask you about is actually pertaining to your episode yesterday, the big Kahuna, the Holy Smokes Theater episode,
Yes,
if
sir.
that's okay. Yeah. So my first question is this, like, just to sort of clarify the factions that you talk about, right? So, like, it makes a lot of sense. Like the Michigan, Wisconsin. I mean, if you've ever met people from these institutions, like they share a lot of the same kind of personality, values, etc. So, is it safe to say, like, I know these factions are not necessarily like hard and fast, like rules or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, but is it safe to say that like Washington and Oregon are also kind of aligned with that faction?
Yeah, because that faction brought them in. But, you know,
Correct.
I mean, you know, of course, I think Washington is more in line with Michigan and Washington. But yeah, I think Oregon probably at this point is as well. Yep.
Yeah. And would you also include USC, UCLA in that mix?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I would too.
But
I mean, I don't even have any.
But again, Ohio State, Penn State both wanted USC and UCLA, obviously.
Correct.
Yeah.
So my first question really was like, you know, what stood out is that, okay, you got Stanford on one side and you got Duke on the other side.
Yeah.
So, you know, I was like, wait a minute, I could have sworn that Michigan and Wisconsin would literally, you know, fall head over heels for Stanford. But I noticed you didn't, and especially if they have like the other West Coast teams in their faction, I would think they would love having Stanford, you know, Bay Area, you know, all, you know what comes with the package.
Yeah.
So my question is, like, how come Stanford wasn't even on the list for the Michigan-Wisconsin faction?
Because that's a great question. That's a great question. There's a part of it
because like I could have sworn that at some point, maybe I'm imagining it, like back, you know, prior to the Washington, Oregon, like didn't they want Stanford, but Fox wouldn't pay for it?
Yes. Yeah.
Or something like that.
Ohio State was really pushing Stanford. Okay. And there's a couple things going on here. One is Ohio State. You know, remember at the time, their president at the time, I can't remember the lady's name, but she came from Stanford. The athletic director of Ohio State at the time, the great long-time athletic director, which I can't think of the name of because my mind is completely gone. Somebody help me in the chat room. Who is a long-time Ohio State athletic director? Anyways, he was a graduate of Notre Dame. He has a relationship with Notre Dame. I guess what I'm saying is this. Ohio State is continually Gene Smith. Thank you, Gene Smith. Thank you, Stormy Cyclone. So Gene Smith and the president of Ohio State at the time were big proponents of bringing Stanford in, but Fox was not interested. The data wasn't there. Okay, after you bring in UCLA, USC, two California schools, they could not sell to. It just wasn't. It wasn't viable. But Ohio State is always wanting to they're really the leaders among everybody, but they really are the leaders of making sure that the door is wide open for Notre Dame. Constant pursuit of Notre Dame. And that is led by the Ohio State faction. The constant pursuit of Notre Dame isn't led by the Michigan faction.
Interesting.
And because there's a Stanford Notre Dame part, so you know, because Notre Dame and Stanford, so but it's even more than that. There is there is something else out west that Michigan and Wisconsin wants to keep open and USC wants to keep open. I'm not going to talk about it today, but it's not Stanford.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
so there's different stuff going on.
Gotcha.
But you know,
Wow.
but if Notre Dame called tomorrow and said we're in, and by the way, we got to bring Stanford, that's going to happen. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I don't want to make it like you said earlier. It's not like the wall between these two factions is not jumpable, right? People, you know. But there are different ways of thinking about it. And I want to clear something up here. You know, Ohio State and Penn State, they have the same 95% of the same interests that Michigan and Wisconsin has. Right? I mean, they're big research universities compared to...
Sure.
So it's just that Michigan and Wisconsin, a long history of being the leading researchers, and they just have more type of research that is connected with your Minnesotas and with your Northwestern. It's sort of some of it's really hard, but anyways, there's two different factions, and that's basically what we believe, and we're pretty sure about what we put down there. I've been working on that show for a while, so we did not just throw. We've been working on it, and we think we got it pretty well. You know, we may be off, but on a school or two, but we do think, for example, that Duke is the longest shot on that board, longer shot than Florida State and Clemson, even though they're an AAU school and everything. But anyways, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, no, so that's great because that leads me into like the second point that I'll make kind of quickly. Like in the same way that Notre Dame joining the Big Ten would kind of tilt the odds in favor of Stanford joining. You know, they would sort of pound the table and put the pressure. So in the same way, I mean, could you envision like if North Carolina joins the SEC, which you know you've mentioned is the chalk, I guess. Like, would they advocate for Duke? I mean, based on my understanding, there's a lot of like, I don't want to say connective tissue because it's not like necessarily with Virginia, but there's a lot of like, obviously shared interest between UNC Duke, a lot of cultural ties, you know, Tobacco Road. And you have mentioned that, you know, the SEC is kind of looking at basketball as the next frontier to kind of expand that bandwidth. And especially if Duke is willing to grease the skids, you know, like, you know, SMU style. Like, would you think that maybe that UNC, you know, you mentioned there's like a pro ACC faction at UNC, and they're kind of encouraged by the fact that, okay, hey, it's easier to stomach the move to the SEC if we bring some of our ACC buddies along, like Virginia, Florida State, Clemson. So, I mean, if Duke comes along, it's like, hey, even better, right?
Yeah, I happen to think, I mean, it's a possibility. But I think there are other stronger ones. But
interesting. Okay.
I mean, only because even though North Carolina and Duke, when it comes to their basketball, when they play on the court, that is probably the most valuable 2 hours of basketball in all of college basketball to media partners.
Correct.
I still think that Virginia is the one that is joined at the hip of North Carolina. So,
yeah, true. Yeah, no, I don't even mean like instead of Virginia. I mean like after.
Oh, I don't know. But see, I don't know how that would work. I don't know how they could. Maybe.
Yeah.
But I think the big scoop, if they go big scoop, which is more than two schools at one time, I think it would be very difficult for the SEC to go to a third non-powerhouse football program. You know what I'm saying? I don't know.
Okay.
I
mean, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because like what I was thinking, I mean, obviously now you hear a lot of people talking about, okay, what happens with the second and third order moves, like beyond 20, you know, the second and third scoops, so to speak. So yeah, and then, you know, I guess like the final thing is like, you know, with Georgia Tech, obviously, like virtually all of your discussion on Georgia Tech has been to the Big Ten. But like Georgia Tech was a historic SEC member. Like if the kind of like University of Chicago was back in the day, right? Urban, academic school. They have, they have actually SEC championships, I think, like back from the 60s or something like that. And, if a lot of these ACC schools kind of migrate to the SEC, you've mentioned, for example, like ESPN sometimes takes a defensive stance of protecting their media markets.
Yeah.
Maybe they might want to protect Atlanta. Obviously, Georgia, I think, would say, hey, our rivalry can now become a conference game. What are your thoughts on that speculation? I guess.
I don't think that's a possibility.
Really?
No. I mean, the SEC is they're going to have to think fast and hard, and I think eventually they'll bend the knee, but to help grease the skids. But if you listen to Pete Thamel with Reese Davis, if you listen to Paul Feinbaum, if you want to listen to Paul Feinbaum, the SEC is looking for a new footprint. Just to go to Florida State and Clemson is something I think they're going to have to do. That's just my opinion right now. It's my prediction. To help grease the skids, if they go to 9 conference games, to bring in a North Carolina, Virginia, I think that big scoop would have to include Florida State and Clemson. But I don't think they're going to include 2 schools in Atlanta and in Georgia. Man, Georgia dominates that market. Georgia Tech,
true.
No disrespect to Georgia Tech. I think that would be completely. I don't mean any disrespect to Georgia Tech. I think that would be completely dead weight in the SEC. Not dead weight in the Big Ten, but in the SEC, yeah.
Yeah. I understand, I would say just like personal experience, like probably Georgia, Auburn, Alabama, Tennessee, all of them are pretty highly represented in that Atlanta area in terms of like alumni and all that stuff. Georgia Tech is, still a valuable fan base, but yeah. But anyways, man, that's all I had. Thanks for the episode, man. That was very interesting. A lot of stuff to chew on.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Beautiful
you.
call. Mr. Georgia Bulldog, Don Scruggs, finally says I'm right about something. Holy smokes. Holy smokes.
Call from
Rick.
Rick is on the line. The floor is yours. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, Greg. How about you?
I'm doing really good. Beautiful Thursday, June 26th.
Yeah, we're getting close.
Yes, we are.
Can you summarize for me real quick, once again, the clandestine call from who to whom?
Boy, I wish we knew more about it. We know more about it today than we did 2 weeks ago because a door was open to us. A new door of information was open to us. But that clandestine phone call had several Big 12 schools and several ACC schools talking with Smash Capital. Neither the Big 12 or the ACC commissioners were involved. That was the word that was used in the report. They were not involved. It did not say that they did not know about it, but they were not involved. They did not set it up. They were not there. We know here at Peek Around the Corner, we can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, we know and we can say 5 schools that were on that phone call. Now, there might have been 20, Rick. So what I'm telling you might not mean, it may not mean nothing. Or it could mean a lot. I have no idea. We know Don't ask me how we know, Rick. You can take this however you want it, Rick. You can throw it in the garbage, however you want to take it. North Carolina was on that phone call. Allegedly. I don't want to get sued by North Carolina. Allegedly, North Carolina participated in that clandestine phone call. Florida State participated in that clandestine phone call. Utah participated in that clandestine phone call. Arizona State participated in that clandestine phone call. Arizona participated in that clandestine phone call. There could be a lot more than 5. A lot more than 5. There could be a few more than 5. I do not know. But that is what we know. Is it about just more information about Smash Capital? Why would it be a clandestine if it was just more information about Smash Capital? Are they working towards something? Is it a super league? Is it 2 conferences under the umbrella of a super league? Or is there going to be the creation of a 3rd power conference supported by Smash Capital? We do not know. Go ahead, Rick.
Wow. Well, that's as big a news, I think, as big as a house settlement.
Well, we don't know where it's heading, though. We don't know much, Rick. We really don't.
But you're naming names.
I'm naming 5 schools. I can confirm and report 5 schools. And I did it on a live show, I don't know how, a couple of weeks ago. I know that allegedly, but we know. But it might not mean as much as it could potentially mean, or it can mean bigger than what we think. We don't know. We just don't know.
But we know that the commissioners of the ACC in the Big 10 and Big 12 are not.
They were not involved.
Involved.
Yeah.
We're not in. Well, perhaps they could have been informed, but not. In other words, they're having somebody else do their dirty work for them. I mean, that's what's going on. If you can't do it yourself and own it, you get somebody else to do it for you.
This is in this is all in the same in the backdrop of all this, Rick. The thing that hovers over all this is the continued chatter behind the curtain of North Carolina. We have been so focused on North Carolina here. We got the North Carolina money perch. We got the chatter. We got B. Tim and his associates. North Carolina, because they are not happy with the status quo. They're just as unhappy as Florida State and Clemson. They didn't go to the courts. They really couldn't go to the courts, but they're not happy. They're right with Florida State and Clemson. They did not want expansion. This new initiative, viewership numbers and stuff, this doesn't even help North Carolina. Really, it doesn't. Bubba Cunningham is coming out every couple of weeks telling I think he's prepping. He's prepping for something. I do not know what it is. But every couple of weeks, he comes out with a new memo, a new email, a new blah, 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 saying, this is what we're doing to raise revenue. We are committed to raising revenue. We got to do change in landscape. We're looking at more things, Well, and we know he's private equity. At least he's to the point of He wants to learn everything about private equity, private capital. He was for a super league. They don't like the status quo at UNC.
Of the 5 schools that you named, that was the one that really perked up my ears
Yeah.
and got me thinking. This is something that probably the Tar Heels have organized without having to brief Greg Sankey on.
Phillips.
Sankey.
Phillips. Huh?
Sankey.
North Carolina?
Yeah, that they're doing this. They know they've got the SEC whenever they want it. Correct?
Well, sure.
They know they've got the SEC whenever they want it. They know they've got the Big Ten whenever they want it. What they don't know is if they can create a conference where they're at the top.
I think they're trying to run out every ground ball when it comes to staying provincial, staying within their world. Like what you just said, being on top of their world. If they're in the SEC, they're not on top of the SEC.
Correct.
If they go to the Big Ten, no disrespect to UNC, but you're not running the Big Ten.
Exactly.
They want to keep Tobacco Road intact, and I think they're going to try to run out every ground ball. And I think when Moen After Dark tweets out this, things could get weird. I mean, I think this clandestine phone call is about North Carolina trying to change the status quo, but make it where it's still Tobacco Road, where they're at top of the hill along with a couple other schools. And I think that's what's going on here.
And that Utah and the Arizona schools are trying to stab their new neighbors in the back.
I'm not saying that.
And leap right over the Big 12.
I'm not saying that.
To join their new friends in Tobacco Road.
I'm not saying that.
No, Rick's saying it.
But I'm not denying it either. But I'm not saying that.
Rick's saying it.
We truly do not know. It's something. You know, it's not your regular phone call with Smash Capital. Remember, Smash Capital was willing to spend, according to reports, willing to put in $9 billion for one type of super league. Who knows what they're willing to do for a particular different power third conference? Who knows?
And that's just one. Smash is just one of many who are in this to land the whale. They all want to reel in the whale. Who's going to be first?
Yeah.
Who's going to be the first one to land that whale?
Okay, there's also this reality. There is this reality that Florida State and Clemson are huge bleeping brands, valuable brands. And I have said this from day one. They're going to get where they need to get to because they're too big and valuable not to get to where they need to get to. But but it may not be the route we think it's going to be. So I've said that from day one. They're too valuable. They're not going to be denied to get to that stratification line. They're too valuable. So they're not going to be withheld. It's just the route that they take might have to be a non-traditional route because of all these other intangibles and variables that come into play. Politics, South Carolina Gamecocks, Florida Gainesville, all these other things that come into play. The Wisconsin Chancellor, the economics. But Florida State and Clemson are too big of valuable brands not to get where they need to get to. And if there is like a third power, if that happens, if that clandestine phone call leads to something dramatically different, it's Florida State and Clemson are the beachheads and North Carolina organizing it. And they're probably looking out west because the one region thing ain't going to work. We know that. We know that. A one region conference.
They're going to want to be national.
Yeah, I mean, the only one region conference that can work is the Southeastern Conference. So,
correct.
But we don't know. We don't know.
But I also think you've got the Clemson and the Florida State not wanting to be in the bottom half of their conference. They want to be the leaders of a conference.
Oh, I don't know. I think they would go. I think Florida State and Clemson would go to the SEC in a heartbeat. I think they would go to the Big Ten in a heartbeat. But those invitations are not happening yet. And the large part of it is because of North Carolina. And North Carolina's got all these different factions. They don't want to give up their, there's a lot of things going on at North Carolina. They're the top domino piece. And the Big Ten and the SEC are going to wait on their decision, what they do. And North Carolina's spending a lot of money, talking to a lot of smart people, powerful people. I mean, they talk to powerful people just to get Bill Belichick in there. They talk to Marco Rubio, for God's sakes. They talk to people to get Bill Belichick. They're talking to powerful people. They're running out every ground ball. As the chatter behind the curtain says, it is fluid. There's a lot of action going on, but nothing is imminent.
Do you think that if the Big Ten tonight took Miami and Georgia Tech, that would fracture the ACC? It would lead to the earthquake that would fracture the ACC?
No. I'm going to say no, but it could, but I'm going to say no. I don't think that's worth. Now, the Big Ten might end up with, I don't think so. North Carolina? North Carolina, I think does that. And I think if North Carolina, Clemson, and Florida State are in the big scoop, that's going to implode I don't think a Georgia Tech and Miami, I don't think that would. It might. How about that? I'm going to hedge my bet. It might.
Well, I'm thinking more of a kinetic reaction to get things moving along. In other words,
yeah, it could. I don't think it's worth. I don't think it's worth the bullet. I think the Big Ten. I know what you're saying, Rick. I do. I get what you're saying, but I think the Big Ten is still. They're going to run out like the North Carolina's going to run out every ground ball. The Big Ten's going to run out every ground ball on Notre Dame and North Carolina. They've got to know what North Carolina's going to do. I think the SEC is the same way. And I think all their consultants, all their lawyers, all their media partners, I think this is a consensus agreement with everybody. What does North Carolina do? That's the plane that has to land. Rick, I'm talking about planes.
Well, how does your Mark feel about the Sun Devils and the Wildcats and the Utes?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. We don't know for sure that this was done outside the parameters of Yormark. We just know that he was not involved. But we don't know. Maybe there's a committee of certain schools. I don't know. We don't know. But boy, we're all waiting for the next hat to drop.
Well, I'll keep watching your show, and so will everybody else.
Okay.
Thanks for taking the call.
I appreciate it, sir. Thank you so very much. BYU football. The Big Ten has too many teams that don't care about football. What are these teams that don't care about football? Because they're sure spending a whole lot of money on football. My goodness. What are these teams that don't care about football in the Big Ten? Northwestern is building a $1 billion stadium. 800, 900. It's probably going to reach to $1 billion stadium in the heart of Chicago. And there's going to be no debt. It's going to be all paid off. It's going to be a very unique 35,000 seat. It's going to have this overhang over the people. Who doesn't care about football in the Big Ten? Now, are you asking me, can the Big Ten schools, a lot of them, consistently beat Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan? No. But neither would any Big 12 or ACC school. Tuffy Duffy 27. I think Tony Petitti's been quiet for a reason. Don't be shocked if he pulls something big. I think he's been quiet because he's a quiet guy. But yeah, I'm going to warn everybody. I'm going to say this. I've said this before. I'm going to say it again. I'm going to warn everybody here. Boy, I hope people remember this warning. But if we all wake up tomorrow morning, Friday, June 27th, if we all wake up tomorrow, June 27th, and there's a report that the Big Ten has walked away from those private equity presentations. They were presented 4 different private equity deals during the Big Ten spring meetings. If the Big Ten walks away from all 4 of those, and we get a report that the Big Ten has said no or declined, I'm going to warn you, do not take that as a forever no. Just like the Big 12, that's not a forever no. People are taking a look. People are game planning. Big Ten wants international distribution. So does the SEC of their content, of their brand. That is, if it's a no, for now, it's a no for now. Now, there was the Fighting Illini. The Illinois athletic director said today that he has looked at private equity and they're not interested at this point. I don't know if he meant private equity or private capital. I'm guessing he meant really private capital, because nobody is going to buy a percentage of the Fighting Illini's athletic department. I think he meant a line of credit, a private capital deal with the private equity firm. But yeah, Illinois, these public universities, there are going to be some of them that do the private capital deal. And Illinois might be one of them eventually. But a private equity deal, no, that's going to be, when that happens, that's going to be at a conference level. these public universities are not going to be able to sell part of their, part of the athletic department. But these conferences, yeah, it's going to happen at some point. Sure, given Kevin Warren's all too public stance, do you think the Big Ten presidents made it clear they want a private commissioner? Yes, I absolutely agree with that. But there is silence, there's a difference between going over the tip of your skis and making declarations before you've got the buy-in from your Big Ten presidents. There's a difference between that and standing up and fighting for what you believe in. I'm a firm believer that Tony Petitti should have said something in public when everybody dug the hole and put the Indiana Hoosiers in it and then filled that up and then put dirt on top of the Hoosiers. I think Tony Petitti should have said, whoa. Indiana was one of the best teams. They deserve to be in one of the best teams. And then when Tennessee got romped and there was other blowouts, Tony Petitti should have made a sly quip on his X account. He should have said something in public. And when Tony Petitti came out there and said, well, he didn't go out there and say, but all the reports reported that the Big Ten was for a 4-4-2-2-1-3. You know what you got to do? You got to go out in public. You got to defend your vision if you truly believe in it. Brett Yormark went out in public. Even Jim Phillips said one little thing and then he ducked behind the curtain. He went out in public. Brett Yormark came out in public today and said 5+11. It's okay for a commissioner. It's okay for a commissioner of the Big Ten when you have told your commissioners that you want a 4-4-2-2-1-3, that means you got Big Ten president buy-in into that vision. It's okay as a commissioner to go out in public and state your vision and why you think this is how it should be. Just because you go out in a microphone and you say something doesn't mean you are a moron like the fat guy from Minnesota. Just because you are quiet doesn't mean you are highly intelligent and you're playing fifth dimensional chess. It's okay for Tony Petitti to say something in public. Please, Tony. Please. All right. No, I got you. I get it, Tom. We're not disagreeing with each other, and if we were, that'd be okay as well. Okay. That's it. We're going to wrap it up. I want to thank everybody for joining us. June 26th. We've been on the air for 2 hours and 13 minutes. I want to thank everybody who's given us a donation to help us keep the lights on. Jacober Cat, Greg taking more shots than Moen. I don't know about that, but I understand what you mean. A lot of elbows were thrown at me today, but Moen, he likes to take other type of shots. Thank you, Jacober Cat. Thank you, Has Been. I appreciate the great question. Jacober Cat, thanks again for your incredible creativiness when it comes to your comments in the super chats. Moen After Dark, thank you so much. Jim Phillips is to leadership as Moen is to sobriety. And Ricky Tungate, Mr. Hoosier, thank you so much for your generosity. I appreciate it. For those who have not subscribed to our channel, what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button, but you got to turn on those notifications. We do not come on live at a scheduled time during the week. We can come on later tonight. We could come on early tomorrow morning to cover breaking news. So subscribe, Turn those notifications on. Before you leave, hit the smash button. Hit the like button. Smash that like button. It helps us with the YouTube algorithms. I appreciate you all coming on in. I'm very humbled that we have big time live shows every single day of the week. Stick with us here at Peek Around the Corner as we head into the college football season. Tomorrow, who is going to be the spotlight team tomorrow? Who is going to be that team that we break down just like we did today with the Baylor Bears? The Baylor Bears. The offense is going to be excellent. Sawyer Robertson, the quarterback. Bryson Washington over the 1,000 yards last year. Dawson Pendergrass, RB2, short yard conversion. Dawson Pendergrass. Then you got Josh Cameron, a great special teams player. 52 receptions, 754 yards. He's coming back. And Keaton Thomas, the linebacker, over 100 tackles. Again, he anchors the defense. That defense has got a lot of transfer players coming on in. They're going to have to produce to get Baylor to the Big 12 championship game. Someplace I think they're going to get to. Arizona State, Baylor in the Big 12 championship game. Book it. Book it. Okay. We'll see you tomorrow or later tonight, maybe tomorrow morning, covering breaking news. Until next time, from all of us at PATC, to all of you, please you all take great care of each other. Thank you so very much.